Hello and welcome to another Sunday Superversive live stream. I am not your host, Benjamin Wheeler, and today I'm joined by your host, Anthony Marquetta. Anthony, how are you doing today?
As always, I've never had a bad day in my life. How are you doing, everyone? We have a terrible show for you today. You're going to love it. Uh, our guest is not here. They perhaps may not show up at all. And if they don't, you're going to have to listen to me ramble for a while. I hope you're looking forward to it, because I
I
sure am.
am too. I am ecstatic. I am rolling on the floor, foaming at the mouth. What are we talking about today?
Roald Dahl.
Ugh.
Oh, no.
All right. So, Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Big Friendly Giant, and many others. And we're not, I guess we're not really talking about the censorship or whatever today. We're talking more about his stories, his many, many stories.
Uh, yes, this isn't a censorship conversation. This is a story conversation. So we come to praise Roald Dahl, not to bury him, as they say. So this stream, we only have Ben for a few minutes, and then I'm off on my own, and that's the reason I picked Roald Dahl. 'Cause I know that Ben does not particularly care for him. With that said, Ben, you have read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you said, correct?
I have.
What did you think of it?
I enjoyed them immensely. Oh,
Uh,
so Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I've always felt is a different animal from either movie and the books. Like they're all three different things. Um, though I always like seeing those kids get turned into horrible things and punished for their misdeeds. But I've never been a big fan of the first movie. In fact, I'd say I'm less of a fan of the first movie as I am of the books. But I'm actually a big fan of the latest Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
oh, you're
Charlie
you're referring to the
Johnny Depp one.
yeah, you're referring to the Timber and Johnny Depp movie. I despise that movie. Hated it. Hated every minute of it. Uh,
What?
yeah, hated all of it. I hated the effects, how they use one friggin' person for every Oompa Loompa. I hated the weird, vaguely pedophilic tone of the entire film. I hated Johnny Depp's performance as a gay Willy Wonka. I didn't really get it. I hated the addition. I hated all of it. I just did not like it.
Hmm.
Uh, Now, with that said, I am not a huge fan of the original movie. I think the original movie is okay. The problem, it seems to me, is that the original book doesn't it is a morality tale without much of a plot, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Roald Dahl famously hated the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I understand why he did. It turns Willy Wonka into a bit of a maniac. Uh, for example, when Augustus Gloop is drinking and he's going, no, and he's being very sarcastic almost, going like, no, stop, please don't. Well, in the book version, if you read those scenes, there is no sarcasm. Right? Like, no
Mm-hmm.
sarcasm. Uh, he is being completely sincere when he is telling Augustus Gloop, don't drink from the chocolate river, it's very dangerous. Or when he's telling Mike TV not to get in front of, the gigantic radioactive laser, because that will kill you. Are you insane? Uh, he is very sincerely in the book saying, seriously, dude, this is a very bad idea. Stop what you're doing. Whereas when you watch the Gene Wilder movie, he's like kind of hoping that they do it, or he doesn't really care if they do it. I
Right.
think that that would have rubbed Dahl the wrong way. There's definitely an element in the book of Willy Wonka being comically, I don't know what the word would be. I want to say comically uncaring, but that's not quite right.
Mm-hmm.
Comically blasé, maybe. Like when he goes, well, where is he gone? And he goes, well, he's gone to be turned into fudge. you know,
Yeah.
just very, very casually, and then everybody gasps and they're like, "Yeah, that would kill him, pretty much." But that's a different thing than Willy Wonka being like, "No, I didn't want them to do this. I was hoping it would not happen. That wasn't the goal of what was going on here, right?" Like,
Right.
you know, the joke is a bit in the reaction, and Roald Dahl has an essay about it at the end of the copy of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and the absolutely insane sequel, which we will definitely talk about,
Mm-hmm.
Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. Because at the end of in the essay, he talks about like his style, and he says you could say that horrible things happen to children, but you can never ever describe them. He
Yeah.
uses that example. He goes like when Willy Wonka says he's gone and turned and gonna be turned into fudge. He goes, you notice I never go, and then his bones are crushed and the blood spurts out, and he's like, no, never, never, never. You just say something vaguely silly sounding, like he's gonna be turned into fudge, and everybody laughs. Yeah.
Right.
Uh, so he knew what he was doing, so I think that's why he didn't like that version, because it turns Willy Wonka's like you're torturing these admittedly children, and it's like Willy Wonka wasn't that sadistic.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is at the end of the first movie when you know Charlie wins the prize, quote unquote, by giving back the everlasting gobstopper.
Yeah.
That scene is not in the book.
Yes.
And that's because in the book, though he does tell Charlie you won, it doesn't really seem like he actually set up the tour as a competition per se. It was more like he just wanted to see, he was going to judge the children, and it turns out they all disqualified themselves in humorous ways anyway. Uh, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think the goal was just that they would meet, he would get to know them, and then he would decide a winner.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and he wasn't going to tell them because he didn't want them competing for it. He just wanted to see who actually was the best behaved of the children. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, you know, the other children were all awful human beings uh, who got turned blue or stretched very tall or whatever. And Charlie was a little saintly angel child. Uh, so that was that.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, I didn't hate the Gene Wilder movie. I really did like Gene. I think Gene Wilder did a good job as Willy Wonka. Uh, like he played a different character, but the character he played was entertaining.
Yeah.
Uh, I also think I'm trying to think of how to put this precisely. So I also think that some of the weird stuff in the movie was entertaining, like the famous, boat ride scene where
Yes.
Gene Wilder says his poem. That is an entertaining scene, I will admit. Uh, I hated the Johnny Depp movie. I'm sorry. I just didn't like it at all. It had style,
Mm.
but that's all I'll give it.
I just enjoyed it. Like it's yeah, that's the best way to put it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it has its own style to it, but I didn't think that Johnny Depp played a very entertaining Willy Wonka. Uh, he struck me as like gay and pedophilic, and I'm not even saying this in a way like I'm not even using gay as an insult. I mean literally, he seemed like a homosexual effeminate, and like that was how he was portraying the character intentionally,
Mm.
you know. And it was a little bit weird to me. What did you think of Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator? Because you don't have that much longer on here with me. What are your thoughts?
I enjoyed it. I can't remember a single thing that happened. Something about a space station.
Yes.
Something about Charlie and Willy Wonka going around fixing problems or something.
So, yep. So many years ago, I wrote an article on Castalia House about Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, and The article I wrote was that it reminded me a little bit of Wither in that it was completely insane and over the top, and that was both its biggest benefit and its biggest flaw, because it was an extremely unfocused book. Uh, with that said, like, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator is absolutely insane. So I remember this story very well. I can see why it was never made and probably will never be made into a movie. So it starts off literally where the last book ends, when they're flying upward in the elevator. So when they're in the elevator, it just keeps going and goes into space. So they dock at a space hotel. And the space hotel hasn't been opened yet. It's still being renovated or something. And when they're at the space hotel, they realize that the Earth is about to be attacked by giant alien blobs called the Vermicious Canids.
Oh,
So,
yes.
in order to kill the Vermicious Canids, they, like, I forget exactly how they do this, but somehow they trick or convince the Vermicious Canids to latch onto the elevator,
Yeah.
which is very funny. And then the elevator drags them through the atmosphere, and the atmosphere burns them up. And, like, the real danger was apparently not that they would attack the Earth, because the Earth was always safe due to the atmosphere. It was that they would destroy the hotel. But whatever. Then they end up on Earth, and they crash back into the chocolate factory. And they decide that they're going to try and help Grandma Josephine and the grandparents grow younger. So to do this, Willy Wonka gives them, like, a special potion or something, but it makes her grow too young, and she ends up in Minus Land. Uh, so what is Minus Land? Well, apparently, Minus Land is, like, it's a world where if you take a de-aging potion that gets you below your birth year, your spirit goes to Minus Land, and if you're touched by one of the monsters in Minus Land, you're trapped there forever. So they need to go and find Grandma Josephine, who is in Minus Land, and spray her with a special, like, re-aging spray without getting touched by any of the Minus monsters. And then they need to re-age her back to her normal age. And then when they do that, they, like, see her aging past, like, the Mayflower, because they apparently aged her, like, hundreds of years, or de-aged her hundreds of years.
Amazing.
So they, like, re-age her past the Mayflower and then back to her original age. And then they're like, yeah, we're not going to give you that again because it might send you to Minus Land. So, tell you what, the president invited us to a party to thank us for saving the space hotel. So, you can go if you can get out of the bed, and that's how the book ends. So you can see it is an extremely unfocused book.
Yes.
I think Roald Dahl intended to write a sequel. He might have even started it, but never did. It is completely insane. However, I have to admit, it's also very enjoyable just to be like, what the hell is he going to do next? Like, you know, Charlie fights aliens, and then he goes into some weird, you know, timeless dimension where he fights monsters that can erase you from existence.
Right.
Not really what you're expecting in your Charlie and the Chocolate Factory sequel.
Mm-hmm.
It will never ever be made into a movie. Uh, as far as I can tell, studios simply pretend it doesn't exist. Like, I've even seen people talk about, like, making a sequel to the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies, and they're just, like, completely unrelated sequels. You know,
Yeah.
in the ideas that I've seen thrown around. I'm sure it will happen someday because Hollywood is totally out of ideas, and it's a brand. So one way or another, it'll probably come about. But
Yeah.
yeah, Roald Dahl though, I've always been a big fan of his. I think that the original Roald Dahl. By the way, our guest may make it in.
Oh boy.
So I'm gonna ask and see how she wants to be introduced. I'll tell her feel free to jump in and ask how she wants to be introduced. Bum 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 bum. Feel free. Okay, sorry. Yeah, we'll see. It'd be nice if we could get a guest so that I'm not speaking on my own the whole time, but it's all the same to me either way. So, yeah, Roald Dahl, I think in his books is a lot darker than most of his adaptations. Uh, his adaptations, I think, feel the need to try and sand off some of the rough edges, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Like, have you ever seen the Danny DeVito Matilda movie?
A very long time ago.
Yeah, it's an okay movie. Uh, I I've seen it like once or twice just because it was on TV. Yeah, one of those things. It's an okay movie. It's a fairly accurate adaptation with with a couple of very weird changes. Uh, Matilda is British in the book, and he turns Matilda American in the movie. Presumably, so Danny DeVito could be like her evil father. Uh, The other thing that is a very weird change is so Matilda has these magical powers that she could use to teleport things around, and use like levitation magic. And in the Danny DeVito movie, it says that the power is caused by the fact that like her abuse has, I don't know, caused so much repressed rage or something that it manifests itself as powers. I don't really like this. Uh and at the end of the movie she just still has the powers.
Right.
Like I don't really like this because it makes it out that like if you're in an abusive family, maybe you too can have powers, which that's not how that works. That's a terrible message actually. Uh in the book, the power is caused by the fact that she is a genius, which she is in the movie as well. And she is so smart, but that she has a lot of untapped brain like energy in her brain she's not using, and that's what she uses that manifests itself as like these powers, this untapped mental energy. But notably, at the end of the book, when she's put into like higher level classes, the powers go away. I like this much more for a couple of reasons. Like, first, the point of the powers were not the point of the book. They were like a very minor side point, if anything. To make it that like then she could just use them whenever she wants, I think misses the point. Second, abuse doesn't cause superpowers. Like that's a really weird message. I don't like that.
What's your superpower? Depression.
Cause like I'm just imagining kids who are in these terrible families where cause like let's be clear here, it's portrayed comically, but Matilda is absolutely being abused, right? Like to be honest, the weirdest thing about Matilda is that they're her actual parents. Like
Yeah.
they're not step parents. They're not like her evil aunt and uncle. Like her parents are just awful people. Uh, like her father is a used car salesman who intentionally defrauds people out of their money and sells them shitty lemon cars. Uh,
Yes.
which is very funny, by the way.
That's actually like it is that part is one of the things I remember from the story. Just him being gleeful, eh, that he has these dangerous parts that could blow up a car, and he's like, hey, I could sell these on, and like the
Oh, it's
whole
actually really funny. He's like teaching his son how to turn back the odometer on a car. Like, it's kind of weird though, because Matilda is so different from them that you're, especially as an adult reader who are used to these types of stories, you're sort of expecting for a moment where it's like Matilda was actually adopted or something, or
right.
like they found her or she was dropped off there or something. But no, They're her actual parents. They're just awful people. And Matilda just isn't. Like, it's a little weird. Uh, and the movie ends with them. They are caught, so they're going to flee to Spain. And they sign Matilda off to live with the teacher, Miss Honey. Uh, which is a nice happy ending. It's a good book. Uh, things I remember about that book though, Miss Trunchbull. Everybody remembers Miss Trunchbull.
Yep.
How do you forget Miss Trunchbull? Miss Trunchbull is one of the greatest children's book villains of all time. She literally picks up children and hammer throws them, like you would do in the Olympics. Like a shot put. Uh,
Right.
like this is described that she was apparently an Olympic shot putter, and she will just pick up the children and throw them. Which is very funny. Uh, Also, the children, Matilda is like, that can't possibly be real. Then she sees her do it, and then she's like, how? How is this possible? And they're basically like, because nobody believes us when we tell them. Like, it's so insane that she's just like, what's more plausible? That I pick up children and shot put them, or your child is lying. And good point, Miss Trunchbull. Uh,
Yep.
and she has a thing called the pokey, which is literally just like a small wooden box with broken glass in it. And if you're bad, she forces you to stand in the pokey and not move, because if you lean over, you're hit by the broken glass. Which, again, completely insane. You gotta love You have to love Miss Trunchbull. They made a
It's
Matilda
crazy.
musical based on the book, and in the musical, Miss Trunchbull was always played by a male actor, and this is one form of cross-dressing I can get behind because that feels very on brand. Uh, Interestingly, when they turned the Matilda musical into a movie, which was okay except for the fact that they blacked Miss Honey, because of course they did, but it was an okay movie, but they had Emma Thompson playing Miss Trunchbull, even though it was an adaptation of the musical. But she did a pretty good job from what I saw. She did a dramatic reading of a scene from the book, which is one of the best scenes in the book, where one of the children has stolen a piece of Miss Trunchbull's chocolate
So the thing
cake.
that drives
So, in order to make a lesson out of him, she has the cook make a gigantic cake while they're all watching him in like an assembly, you know, in the gym or something when he's on stage, and she forces him to eat the entire cake in front of them. And like about halfway through, all of the children start getting super into it to see if he's actually going to finish the cake.
I could believe that.
And then the kids get like super into it.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I mean, like at a certain point, watching somebody eat something that they should not be able to eat is fascinating. Like that's the whole mukbang thing. Except, he probably isn't eating himself to death for a job.
yeah, it was very funny. Uh, it's a very funny scene. It's a very good scene. Roald Dahl, I would say, excels at this sort of over-the-top weirdness. He's actually a very good. He has some very good short fiction, I should say. He has a reputation, right, as the Edgar Allan Poe of Europe. Uh, I don't know how deserved it is. I don't think he's as good of a writer as Poe, but that is such like lukewarm criticism. I can't emphasize to you enough how lukewarm that criticism is,
Right.
because almost nobody is as good of a writer as Edgar Allan Poe, who is
Yes.
literally, you can make the argument that he's in like the top 5 most influential authors of all time. Like, he's literally created multiple genres single-handedly. Uh, so yeah, he's not as good as Edgar Allan Poe, but what does that mean? Uh, some of his short fiction is very good. His most famous story was turned into an episode of the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Theater show. It is called Yeah, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. That's what it was called. Uh, and the short story was called Lamb to the Slaughter, and it was about a woman who clubbed her husband to death with a frozen leg of mutton, then served it to the police uh, to get rid of the evidence. Very
Amazing.
good story.
I wouldn't
Very entertaining.
like when it comes to things like comparing author to author. I would have never connected Edgar Allan Poe to Roald Dahl for any reason.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't if you only knew his children's stuff, but when you see his adult fiction, like some of it does get very strange. Like he has Royal Jelly, which is about like a father, who's some sort of weird I can't remember the details of the story, so I might be getting it wrong. I think he was some sort of weird mad scientist and he wanted to feed his daughter royal jelly from like a beehive cuz it helped the bees grow quickly, so maybe it would help his daughter. And it like ends with his daughter mutating into like a giant bee thing uh or
Amazing.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, very very weird story. Good. I mean, I've mentioned the Great Automatic Grammatizator before, which I believe is starting to come true. I actually just saw, so one of the plot points in the Great Automatic Grammatizator, which is about, literally, it's about a machine that writes stories for you, right?
Yes.
And one of the plot points was that you could press a button to add certain emotions to the story, right? Like, and so he tries this, uh, presses a button, tries to add, and in the story, and it works. And he ends up buying out like over half of the, half of all books being written or something are actually by this AI. Well, I saw an online app that allows you to add spice to your writing. Like if you want to add certain emotions, you could hit the button and it will add it for you. And I was like, oh my god, it's real. The great automatic grammatizator is real. Uh, I don't think we're at the point where full fictional stories can be written. On the other hand, we are at the point where AI poetry can be written. And pretty good AI poetry, as much as you hate to admit it. Like, better poetry than I can write, because I'm not a poet. I don't have that sort of skill. But if you give an AI a certain theme, tell you write a sonnet in a particular rule set, it will do it on theme and pretty good. Like, I've done this with it before. So, we are not as far as you think from full stories. Uh, and I do think we are going to reach that point where AI can write competently. I don't think AI in the realm of storytelling is ever going to be better than the top humans. It's just the sort of thing that I don't think AI would be able to do in that way. There is too much art and not enough science, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Uh, but I do think that we'll get way better than some people think. Like, probably better than the average person, only worse than the top writers. Uh, I don't know exactly what's going on with the writer's strike, if it has anything to do with AI. I don't think it does. But I
It,
wouldn't be surprised if we see writers strike over AI soon, because it's going to get bigger.
mm,
But yeah, that's the great automatic grammatizator. So he has one of those stories that's very very big, right? Like or very very good at prediction of the future that all of these top authors seem like they need at some point or another.
yeah.
Uh, his other short stories, like I remember one that was just about two people who advertise that they will punch someone in the face for you. And that's literally it. That's the story. They like go, you think that it'll work, and then somebody hires them, and it's at like a big public event, and they run up, punch a dude in the face, then sprint off, and then they go, hell yeah, and then it like makes the news, and they start getting more people buying into their business to like just punch random people in the face. Uh,
Amazing.
cool. So good news I'm getting is that at some point or another, our guest will join us. Uh, so I won't if you need to leave before our guest gets here, you can. I'll be happy to fill the dead air with rambling.
I've still got a little bit of time.
Okay, that's good. So, is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory the only Dell book that you've read?
No, I've read tons
What
of
else?
dull books. Oh
I
wait, you
thought you
said
weren't.
dull. uh,
But
no, Roald Dahl. So, was he the Giving Tree?
I no, that was Shel Silverstein.
Oh, okay. I never liked that book, by the way.
No,
Something.
The Giving Tree is a terrible book, but I love Shel Silverstein. Where the Sidewalk Ends is amazing.
So the thing with Roald Dahl, and I've read a whole bunch of his stuff, I just don't remember it, is that it doesn't do anything for me. Like it's more like I haven't read many of his novels, but like or his longer form stories, but like his short stories were always in my school books growing up because
Really interesting.
dude, I went to a private Christian school, a very cheap private Christian school, but still went there. So there's a different bunch of it. There's a certain lyricism, like there's a certain beat to his stuff, and a certain quirk that I do find very appealing. But for some reason, I cannot remember it as well as other people seem to, and I don't tend to seek it out like people might expect.
Yeah, it's uh Dahl has has his own style and a certain weirdness to him. I know I'm not gonna say the name because I haven't gotten her permission, but I know certain people have told me that they don't like Dahl because they found him too mean, like to the point where it was like a negative view of the human race.
Hmm.
I don't know if I would go that far necessarily. Uh, on some of his children, like they were making that point about James and the Giant Peach. Now, believe it or not, I don't even know if I've actually read James and the Giant Peach. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think. Maybe many years ago. I don't remember it very well. I don't think it's one of his better books, and that makes sense. It was his first children's book. On the other hand, though, like I don't know if I would say that Roald Dahl was misanthropic to the point of nihilistic, right? Like,
Hmm.
with that said, there's definitely a misanthropy to Roald Dahl. Like, they made an adaptation of his book The Witches. They also made a remake, but I've heard the remake was mediocre, so I've got no comment on it. I've not seen it, but I learned that they changed the ending. So, The Witches, which by the way is a book I highly recommend, is one of his better children's books, I think. And The Witches is about women who go around and who are not real women but are actually witches, and they hate children, and they want to turn all children into rats using their magical powers. And like The Witches was one of those Roald Dahl books that was censored relatively heavily. I mean, the book, all of the censoring is fairly light, but it was relatively heavy comparatively,
Mm-hmm.
because he would, he would comment on the ugly appearance of the witches. That they would need to wear disguises, and you could tell who they were because, like, they always had to wear gloves because they had long claws, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they were actually bald. Uh, and real women, of course, aren't bald, right? Which that's one of the things that they kind of tried to edit out, you know. And the main character is at one point he learns that his grandmother used to be a witch hunter years ago. He's an orphan being raised by his grandmother, and he
Mm.
learns that his grandmother used to be a witch hunter, and she tells him all about the witches. And then he accidentally stumbles upon like the Grand High Witch in a secret meeting, and she turns him into a rat. And he learns that they're planning on like turning all of the children of Norway or something, which I think is where this takes place, into rats. Dahl actually grew up in Norway, so that's why, or at least for he had like, family homes in Norway. So anyway,
Yeah.
so the book is about him he teams up with like another boy who's also been turned into a rat, and they need to find a way to stop the witches. I can't remember exactly how they did it, except that it was fairly clever and fairly entertaining, you know. And they get rid of all of the witches, and the book ends though, uh, kind of infamously and famously. The boy does not turn back into a human. He remains trapped as a rat. And not only does he remain trapped as a rat, he remains trapped as a rat and is given 9 years to live. So he has a conversation with his grandmother about this. And he says, "How long do you have to live?" And she says, "Well, if I'm lucky, about 9 years." And he goes, "Well, then it doesn't matter what you look like or who you are, so long as you have somebody else out there who loves you," which is a very nice message, don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
Uh, and I feel like something that the woke crowd would like, but whatever. Uh, like, it's a very nice message, don't get me wrong. It does end with the very metal reveal that they're going to spend the rest of their lives hunting down the witches around the world. Him and his grandmother are just going to go, like, witch hunting.
Amazing.
Which, with him as a rat and his grandmother as one of the witch hunters. But the movie version of the witches changes the ending and has him turn back into a human. Uh, I heard it's a good adaptation. That's my understanding. And maybe it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, it may very well be a very good adaptation. But it is a little bit unfortunate that they didn't stick to Dahl's ending, I think. It's a bit of a shame, right?
Yes.
I can understand why they don't do it. The remake, I've heard, does stick to Dahl's original ending, presumably to try and differentiate itself.
Hmm.
But I don't think. I think the rest of the movie just wasn't particularly good. Yeah, like I've heard it was just a very mediocre film.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I
it's
never
a bit of. It's a shame.
I never saw the new one, so I can't really say anything about it. Um, you
Did
know,
you watch the original?
no, I didn't know there was original.
Uh, I actually only ever heard about it. I never saw it. It was like a TV movie, but it was a very well received TV movie. Like if you look it up, it's got very good reviews. Uh,
Gotcha.
but I've never seen it, unfortunately. It's not super easy to find. I would probably need to sail the seven seas for it. Uh, but yeah, the witches. That's the sort of thing where I could see where people are like, "Okay, doll, you've gone a little bit too far. Maybe back it up a little bit."
You've gone
Uh,
too far.
exactly. And he has the twits, which ends with like the main characters. It's literally just about a married couple, and they're both awful people, and they are constantly playing extremely cruel pranks on each other for no reason other than pure spite. Like one of the pranks is that one of the twits convinces, I think his wife, I think it's the male twit, convinces his wife that she's shrinking by gluing on a small piece of wood to the end of her cane every day until she's like, "Oh my god, you're shrinking." And he like replaces her chair with a larger chair so that she thinks that like everything around her is shrinking, and then I forget exactly what he does. Convinces her to do something humiliating to prevent the shrinking or something. Uh this is the sort of book this is the sort of book that it was. It was like these two people who just do increasingly cruel and mean-spirited pranks on each other, and like they hate children. And then the book ends with like I think they both die or something, or they disappear or whatever. Gonna look it up because I can't recall exactly, but it ends with them both getting their comeuppance in some vaguely humorous way. Yeah, the twits. Oh, okay. Um, so they put all their weights down on the heads and catch the dreaded shrinks. with their bodies compressing downwards. Their head shrinks into their necks shrink into their bodies shrink into their legs, and their legs shrink into their feet. Their feet shrink into nothing but 2 pairs of shoes and old clothes. Mr. and Mrs. Twit are then nowhere to be seen. Their absence is promptly celebrated by everyone. Uh, and that is how the book ends. This is one of the things they would change. They changed a lot of stuff in the Twits because the Twits is, frankly, such an incredibly mean book. Uh, I enjoy it very much. I am entertained by the Twits, but it's just a mean book. Ben, it appears, has muted himself, leaving me all alone to ramble on about Roald Dahl. So, until our guest joins in, and our guest may join in at any time, I'm going to talk a little bit about my favorite Roald Dahl book, or I should say one of my favorite Roald Dahl books, which is actually not a work of fiction at all, but a work of nonfiction. So, Roald Dahl wrote 2 autobiographical books, Boy and Going Solo. Boy is a good book. It goes through his time growing up in, he grew up, like, between England and Norway because his family was Norwegian. He has a lot of siblings. He went to boarding schools and hated it there. He tells stories of, like, what he was doing at boarding school. He was apparently good at sports, but he was often bullied. He claims that the teachers would beat the children, and sometimes pretty severely. Uh, well, Dahl, in Boy, that book is most famous for the goat's tobacco incident. It's a story that was made it into, of all things, I remember reading it in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book, if anybody remembers those. But the story was about, they were on vacation in Norway, and his sister had a fiance who was a big, or at least a boyfriend, I think he was her fiance, who was a big man's man, and all of the children hated him. And he was always smoking uh, a great big pipe of tobacco. So he was like bragging about how manly man he was, and the whole family hated him, but none of them wanted to say it because was their sister's fiance, so it would be rude. Well, when he leaves, Dahl notices that there's a lot of dried up goat poop on the island. Where they happened to be, there were wild goats, and there was dried up poop all over the island. So he takes the goat poop, grinds it up in his fingers, and mixes it in with the tobacco. And they said that the whole family sees him doing this, but none of them stop him. So all of them were in on the joke at this point, or on what was going on. So he comes back, he picks up his pipe, and he starts making this big manly men speech about how real men, they smoke tobacco, and he was a manly man. And then in the middle of his speech, he gives this hacking cough, just he's hacking, he's choking. He says, "What is this? Absolutely, like, the tobacco go bad, this disgusting tobacco." And the youngest member of the Dolls, they're all trying their best to keep a straight face watching this, but the youngest member of the Doll family, who is his little sister, cracks up laughing and is doubled over. And when he asks her why she's laughing, she says, "You're smoking goat's tobacco." And then when he went after them, everybody scattered. Uh, and that story on its own, like, got separated from Boy. It's really the only memorable moment of Boy, that, and, there's a story of them sneaking like a dead rat into a chocolate factory because they thought that or a chocolate shop, because they thought that the owner was extremely mean. So they snuck a dead rat in, and then they get caught. Uh, yeah, and it ends with Dahl taking a job working for a gasoline company in South Africa. So That was Boy. Boy was pretty good. He claims it wasn't really an autobiography because he was skipping everything in his early life that was boring and only told about what was interesting, but it was an autobiography, right? So he gets to the second book, which is one of my favorite nonfiction books ever. And this book is titled Going Solo. So, what is Going Solo about? Broadly speaking, Going Solo was the story of how Dahl fought in World War II as part of the RAF. Now, it's really split into multiple parts, and part one of the book comes from his adventures in South Africa working for the gasoline company, how he became friends with a family and he had a black servant who he called a boy, who worked with him, and how he trusted him with his life and had the highest respect for him. He tells a story, like, I think it's generally accepted by people that Going Solo is highly fictionalized. He tells a story in Going Solo uh, about there is they're waiting for war to break out with Germany, and they're in South Africa, and there's like Germans in South Africa, and it is Dow's job to prevent people from leaving the town, the Germans from leaving the town. Because he's British. Well, they get the radio. A war has been officially declared. The Germans are now prisoners of war, right? And the Germans all want to leave. So they all come up on in their jeeps. They basically surround Dow while he's blocking the road, the only road out of the town. His boy is also there, hiding, uh, waiting with his gun out to fire if he needs to protect Dahl. According to Dahl in this story, and again, this is considered by many to be at least partially fictionalized. A German gets out of his jeep with his weapon and tells Dahl to move, and Dahl says no. So he brandishes his gun in Dahl's face and tells him again that he wants to leave the town, and he tells Dahl to move, and Dahl says no again. Well, he pulls the gun out and is about to shoot Dahl, and Dahl closes his eyes and hears a crack and figures that he is dead. But when he opens his eyes, the German is dead on the ground in front of him. His boy, who has been hiding, had shot him and saved Dahl's life with a perfect headshot. So all of the Germans, seeing what's happening here, get back in their jeeps and turn around and go back into the town. When they see that the leader of the Germans was shot. So that probably didn't happen. But I certainly wish it did, because it's a fantastic story. The second part of Going Solo is a story of how he joined the RAF. Uh, this was so compelling that many, many moons ago, I actually attempted to turn this into a screenplay. Since then, I think that writing screenplays is basically a waste of time because it's impossible to get them made, and it's impossible, and Hollywood isn't going to do anything with them. And you're better off spending your time writing books that people will actually want to read. But this was years ago because it was so compelling. So Roald Dahl joins the RAF, and the RAF was like the cool kids club in World War II. If you wanted to fight in the RAF, that was where that was the awesome job, right? Well, he joins the Royal Air Force, and he's in Africa, and he's flying his plane, and there is a running theme throughout the story of the incompetence of the British High Command and British intelligence. And he's losing connection with Britain. It is getting dark, and he doesn't see where he is and he can't see well where he's going. And for some reason, they're not communicating with him. Well, naturally, his landing gear breaks. He has to make an emergency landing. The landing gear doesn't work, and he crashes into the middle of the desert. Uh, he gets extremely badly injured. Uh, like to the point where he is actually blind. He has just enough of his wits about him to realize that if he doesn't get away from the burning plane, it will probably explode soon. So he manages to crawl himself away from the wreckage of the plane. And sure enough, it does explode, and it rains bullets down around him, according to Dal. and then he passes out. And when he wakes up, he is in a British hospital, and he cannot see. He is completely blind. He is told that the injury, where he hit his head when he fell, uh, has caused his eyes to swell shut. Whether he is blind or not, they genuinely do not know, and they won't know for 6 months. So, he stays in the hospital for 6 months. According to Dahl, he falls in love with a nurse there until he regains his eyesight, and then he was no longer in love with her. But in 6 months, his eyes are opened, he can see, and he re-enters the RAF. Now, Roald Dahl was an extremely tall person, well over 6 feet tall. He didn't really fit in the airplanes, but according to him, they had no maximum height requirement, so he was allowed to fly. He gets into the plane, and he is assigned to Greece. So, most people in the West don't realize that there was even a Grecian campaign in World War II. The reason people don't know or have forgotten about the Grecian campaign is because it was a total disaster for the Allies. They were essentially run out of Greece. In one of my favorite scenes in the entire book, Roald Dahl arrives in Greece, lands his plane, and when he lands the plane, they tell this story. He says that he is cramped so badly he can't lift himself out, so the mechanic in Greece needs to pull him out of the plane. And he lands at a small, like a small airfield. There are I think he says 20-ish planes there. And the mechanic looks at him and says, it's a shame. It's a real bloody shame. And Dell goes, what? What are you talking about? What's a shame? And he goes, see that plane? He goes, that plane came all the way over here from England. He goes, no, even further. That plane was made in Britain, or it was came all the way from Egypt. He goes, no, even better. It was shipped to Egypt after being made in Britain, came all the way from Britain to Egypt, then flew all the way from Egypt to Greece. And you know what? And Gal goes, what? What are you talking about? He goes, it's not going to last for 20 minutes here. And Al goes, what? What are you saying? And then he goes, mate, you're going to, you're not going to last. You're going to die. He goes, why would you say that? He's like, and where are all the other planes? And then the mechanic looks around and goes, look around you. He goes, these are all the other planes. And Dal stares at him and goes, you have to be joking. That can't be true. And he goes, nope, it's completely true. These are all of the planes left in all of Greece. Everyone else is gone. And Dal is like, that's insane. That can't possibly be true. He's like, these are all of the planes left in all of bloody Greece, and we are all gonna die. So stunned, Dal goes to try and talk to his commanding officer. You might think there would be some sort of orientation or onboarding process, and you are wrong. His officer tells him, rest up, you're flying tomorrow. Luckily, Dahl befriends a man named David Cook, spelled Coke, but pronounced Cook, according to Dahl. And David Cook kind of tries to give him some tips. He tells him to try and make sure that he gets behind the planes that he's flying, that, when he goes on missions, that he needs to make sure that he doesn't let them get behind him, and that's important, and gives him a few very basic tips, and that is all of the battle training and orientation that Dahl gets before he is sent off to fly on missions in Greece. Also, incidentally, in Greece at the time, with Dahl, and in this unit of planes that were left there, was the famous British flying ace, Pat Paddle. So if you look up Pat Paddle, and I recommend you do that right now, you will see that Pat Paddle, Marmaduke Thomas St. John Paddle, was the greatest British fighter ace in the Royal Air Force. So Dahl was actually in a unit with the greatest fighter ace in World War II. Well, Dahl goes on a few missions. There are some interesting things in there. He wins his battles generally. He notes that he's normally pretty happy to see the men parachuting out of the planes. Uh, that when the men parachute out of the planes, he never really wanted to kill anyone. He just wanted to serve his country, so he was always happy when the pilot survived. But he did kill, there are some confirmed kills that Dahl had. Like, he recalls winning one battle by seeing the plane nosedive, and he realized that a bullet must have hit the pilot in the head, and that he had slumped forward and onto his stick and flown his plane to the ground. He tells one story of him and David Cook were out and they had just taken a shower, so they weren't wearing any clothes, walking from the shower tent to their tents or whatever, when they are being strafed by German Messerschmitts. So they jump and get flat on the ground, completely naked, thinking that they're all going to be killed. But the British had anti-aircraft defenses that Dahl claims were 99% of the time completely useless. It was just impossible to aim with those things and actually get a hit. But in this instance, saving both of their lives, they managed to get a hit on the plane, and the plane is downed. So that saves their lives. He actually fights Roald Dahl. Yeah, as I'm reading this. Anyway, he actually fights in the famous Battle of Athens. The Battle of Athens was one of the largest aerial battles in World War II. Dahl fights in the battle. He describes as basically being like a gigantic and chaotic mess. He claims that the British actually did extremely well in the battle. They downed way more German planes than the Germans downed British planes. However, because they were so badly outnumbered, it was a losing effort no matter what. And Pat Paddle was killed. So, as I look up David Cook, is the one who tells Al that their situation was absolutely hopeless. And he tells him, I was in the Battle of Britain before I came here. That was bad enough, but it was peanuts compared to this crazy place. We have no radar here at all. The Greeks are our radar. We have a Greek peasant sitting on the top of every mountain for miles around, and when he spots a bunch of German planes, he calls up the ops room here on a field telephone. That's our radar. Does it work? Asked Dahl. Now and again it does, he said. So that's David Cook. Also, just to give you an idea, I am going to talk about Cook for a moment because Cook, as it turns out, was a hero. Roald Dahl describes him as warm-hearted and brave and generous, and over the next few weeks we were to become close friends. So when Dahl first arrived as a replacement pilot and met Cook, while serving in Libya, Cook was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for his work in an attack on enemy transport and for his leadership as a flight lieutenant. So that's interesting. Roald Dahl's close friend, David Cook, was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. So, sometime after the Battle of Athens, the British are finally ordered to retreat from Greece. So, they retreat, and again, the theme comes up of horrible leadership by the British in this instance. At one point, they know that they need to leave. They know that they've been spotted by the enemy, and they know that the enemy is coming to kill them, but they have been ordered not to fly off. So Cook and Dahl are sitting there going, this is completely insane. If we wait here, we're going to be killed. Just like, well, we've been ordered to wait until we get the word to move. So they're at their wits' end. They are completely lost. And Dahl tells Cook, okay, I have an idea. Let's go to our planes, sit in our planes. And then as soon as we get word that we can leave, we immediately fly off. So this is exactly what they do. They wait in the plane, and then as soon as they hear the radio say go, they fly off. According to Dal and Cook, if they had done anything else, or at least according to Dal, uh, according to Dal, they as soon as they fly off, the Germans show up and bomb that area, and or shoot down that area. If Dahl had not flown off exactly when he did, then he would have been killed. So that was truly terrible. But they do manage to survive. So they go into, I think, eventually Pakistan, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't have anything in front of me confirming it specifically, but he does go to the Middle East and fights Vichy French pilots after staying in Alexandria, according to the little synopsis I'm reading. So that's all fantastic. Dahl, though, is experiencing headaches in his fighting, and he is ordered to return home. And Going Solo ends. There has been a running theme of him writing letters back and forth with his mother, telling her to evacuate London. He doesn't even know if she is definitely still alive, since he doesn't know if she's actually left, and he's not, he's moving so often, he's not getting the letters frequently. And it ends with him getting honorably discharged due to his head injury from the crash, and walking back into the arms of his waiting mother, who Dell was famously very, very close with. So nice, happy ending. So Going Solo is a very nice book. David Cook incidentally dies at some point. He dies after Dahl leaves, though. So sadly, he never does meet David. Cool. And as I'm saying this, I'm slowing down my speech because we shall have a guest in a moment. So let me speak. Hello. How would you like to introduce yourself? I don't know how you want me to.
Just AM Freeman, as always.
Okay, fantastic. So we have finally our guest on. This is the authoress A.M. Freeman. How are you tonight? I know you've been busy.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I totally didn't account for time when we started the movie, and then baby and all that. So I'm very sorry. I'm an hour and a half late.
It's fine. Things happen. I've learned long ago that you can't take these sorts of things too personally and too seriously. People get busy. People do
Yeah.
things, and they get caught up. So I've been discussing, as you've been gone, Going Solo. I don't know
That
if you
is
know
my
that book.
favorite. That is honestly probably one of my favorite of Roald Dahl's books.
So Going Solo for many years was probably my favorite Roald Dahl book. It might still be, to be honest. Many, many moons ago, when I was more naive, I actually tried to turn Going Solo into a screenplay. Like, I wrote the beginning of it. Uh, in retrospect, I would not do that for the very basic reason that I don't think there's any point in making screenplays anymore. Like, I don't Hollywood. First off, best case scenario, you will not be able to get it made, right? Especially a movie like
Mhm.
this isn't a small little indie film either, which would be hard enough. This would be like a war epic, and it's impossible. You can't get those things made. So you're wasting your time in that sense. And also, I just don't trust Hollywood. I wouldn't want to work with Hollywood, even if I could get it made. So I wouldn't want to get it made, even if I could get it made, and I couldn't get it made anyway. So it's really a waste of time to work on a screenplay, which is very sad.
It might be interesting as a play, but I don't know how hard of a play that would be. Be a lot of set changes.
It would, yeah, it would be difficult to do as a play though, because so much of it involves flying. Like, uh, it's such an amazing biography. Like, I remember, like, one of the things that made me do is that the opening that I wrote is one of the better. Like, it has such a cinematic opening. You have Roald Dahl flying in the desert, right over the desert, and he is trying to communicate with, with Britain, right, the British
Mhm.
High Command, and then he crashes in the desert, and gets badly injured and has to roll out of the way before his plane explodes. And then he wakes up in a hospital and is told, "You might be blind. We won't know for sure for 6 months." And then in 6 months, he's flying off to Greece. And then he shows up in Greece, and you have that wonderful scene in Going Solo where the mechanic pulls him out of the plane, and tells him, like, it's such a bloody shame. This plane came all the way from England, and it's not going to last for 20 minutes out here. And Dal is like, "What are you talking about? Where are the rest of the planes?" And he goes, "These are the rest of the planes. These are
Oh.
all of the planes in Greece. It's about 20 planes." And I believe that by the time that Dahl left, there were 8 planes left. And one of
Wow.
them, one of the people who was there with him was Pat Paddle, who is actually, if you look him up, he is the greatest English fighter pilot of World War II. Like, he actually was a fighter ace who had, like, man, over 30, I think, over 30 confirmed kills. If all of the claims made for him are correct, as I'm looking this up, personal somewhere around 50 kills as a fighter pilot, and he dies, I believe, in the Battle of Athens, which was
Oh, wow.
the largest aerial battle of World War II, which Dahl fought in, which is fascinating. Yeah, very,
Man, yeah.
very,
This
very
is
cinematic
funny because
book.
we just finished watching Top Gun Maverick, so my head's very much in planes.
It's a very cinematic book, very entertaining book.
It's crazy the people he meets. I remember just how, like, on his on the boat going over to Africa, just all the crazy characters he met, and they had some of them had very particular things about them.
See, I don't remember that part of the book as much. I remember the RAF portion of it more. It was
See,
basically
I
split
remember more of
apart.
the like on the boat and in Africa. Like, I remember that he did plane stuff, but I mostly remember, man, I really gotta read it again. But I remember him meeting all these very strange people on the boat over to Africa, and a lot of his time in Africa. Like, there was a lady that got, like, picked up by a lion, but then the lion put her down and she was fine, or his gardeners had a standoff with a black mamba.
That I remember. I do remember too when World War II started, when he had to hold the city, and he had his boy hiding in who he like. Literally, he had a black servant that he called a boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, and like, I'm surprised at that. That for all I know, they might have rewritten that, but like, he was being honest about it, and he claims, he was very close with this guy, like that he had nothing but the highest respect for him, but he called him his boy, uh, and he saved his life when, like, a German pointed a pistol at his chest, and his boy, like, shot him through the head before he could get killed. And from what I have read, Going Solo probably included a few tall tales in there, and that
Mm-hmm.
was probably one of them. Uh, a little bit too cinematic.
Yeah.
Still, it makes for it's one of my favorite autobiographies ever. Like, it
It's
is
not boring
extremely
at all.
compelling.
It sounds like a made up story almost in some ways.
I mean,
Very interesting, like
some of it probably was at least
a little
exaggerated.
embellished. Yeah.
Mhm. But it is incredibly compelling. Like,
Even his the boy, like
yeah,
the book about the first part of his life was interesting. I I remember them, like, putting goat turds into, like, instead of the tobacco, into the boyfriend of one of the sisters that they didn't like when they went on
yep,
this island together. And then the the school, oh, and his tonsils getting taken out. But then when they're in school and him as, like, a new guy having to, like, go and sit and warm up the toilet seats for, like, the other guys. Bizarre things
yeah.
like that.
He
Sounds
describes.
exhausting.
It's very interesting. Like, when you get into Dahl's personal character, he was one of those people. He was of a different time.
Mhm.
Supposedly he was not a very moral man. He cheated on his wife pretty
No.
regularly. He was kind of a jerk. However,
Well, that's sad.
it's a little sad. Yeah, it's very funny. I've mentioned this story before, but people always do this with me. Like they expect me to like, because I'm not a leftist, so I can absorb the fact that Roald Dahl is not a very nice guy, and also say, but I do like his books. People have
Hmm.
tried to do this to me with Hayao Miyazaki, like, because there's a bit of there's like a hyper conservative backlash against Roald Miyazaki that I don't agree that I don't agree with, right?
Is
Like
it because of like the issue with his son or something else?
So the issue, they think that first off, Miyazaki was a communist up until about the 1990s or so.
Hmm.
Uh, and this definitely, and they say that like his films have these feminist undertones and these communist undertones. Personally, I do not agree with like this attempt at you know saying that his work is actually useless or whatever. Right, but people have tried to needle me because I've defended him, and they've gotten mad at me because, like, why are you defending an enemy? It's like, because I don't think he's an enemy in this case. And they've tried to push, like, his relationship with his son, like you mentioned, like, that this
Hmm.
should really bother me. And it's like, so what do you think about that? And I go, that sounds pretty terrible. Like, he treated his son badly. I don't know what you're expecting me to say. Like, it's like, I don't care if he's a good person. Like, it's like, well, what
Yeah.
do you think? It's like, I think he treated his son badly. What exactly is your point? Uh,
That's the thing is like the internet's connected us in so many ways, but it's overconnected us where we think we have a need to have a say in everyone else's business in a way. I feel like that's why
yeah,
everyone wants to jump on cancel culture and be like, "Oh, we have a say in this."
I think that they thought because I was defending him from like attacks, and they thought that I was being too pushy. So they thought I was doing the leftist thing, where it's like, Miyazaki can do no wrong, which I wasn't, right?
Hmm.
Like I don't really care, to be honest,
Yeah.
like I don't really care if he's a good person or not. That was never my point. And I was
Hmm.
like, no, I genuinely don't. I think you're interpreting his movies wrong. I think that you're interpreting the stories wrong. I don't think you're right to be canceling him. So then they're like, why are you going out of your way to defend this guy? And it's like, hey, your hero Miyazaki, like he went after his son. I'm like, yeah, that was pretty terrible. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the
What was it?
same.
Uh, I did see. I think today. I have no horse in the race, but I guess there's some like Aztec game that some people were making a fuss over, and I guess the developers decided to like make it so that you can play as either the Aztecs or the Spaniards.
Oh
So
man,
that
that's fun.
so I guess like now you can be either the either one, and so then people are like, I can't believe they're caving to the Nazis.
Oh, that's
Which
really
is
funny.
funny. I know.
Uh,
I don't know who. I wonder who was worse, the Aztecs or the Nazis. We probably shouldn't discuss it though.
Ben and I will discuss him one day. The answer is the Aztecs, but whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Not for this discussion anyway. Going back to
Yeah.
Roald Dahl, though, like he was a complicated person though, because there was also like his wife. I remember reading this. His wife had a stroke. That was a really horrible stroke. It did not kill her, but they basically
Hmm.
told her she's never gonna walk. She's never gonna talk again. And
Oh man.
Roald Dahl like heard this and said, you don't get to decide that. That's not up to you. And they said that he basically bullied his wife into walking again.
Wow.
Uh,
Tough love question mark?
yeah, that's how they described it. So he was a
Wow. Yeah, that's
complicated
kind of rough.
person.
Yeah,
He
as
he
many
was
of
a
us are.
complicated person. Uh, his daughter died at one point too, so that's also in
Oh, that's
the
hard.
you got to throw that into the stew, right? Of
Yeah.
like the sort of guy that he was, but uh, it doesn't like it's one of those things where it's like learning that Roald Dahl is a bad person does not particularly concern me, or not a very good guy. Yeah, doesn't really
Yeah.
concern me very much. Uh, with that said, I've talked to people. I think his books can be very love it or hate them because I know people who adore them. I'm a huge Roald Dahl fan. Grew up a huge Roald Dahl fan.
Hmm.
I know people who cannot stand Roald Dahl, uh, because they think he's misanthropic, and he is
Misanthropic.
misanthropic. That he doesn't like humanity. Uh,
Uh,
and I could sort of see it. Like I was describing the Twits earlier, and it's like the Twits was a book for very small children, but like it's a very mean book.
Mhm.
Like, it's literally just two very unpleasant people playing increasingly cruel pranks on each other. And that's the book.
I mean, I think I've only read The Witches, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Great Glass Elevator, and the BFG. I remember loving the BFG when I was young.
So the BFG is a lovely book. I enjoy the BFG very much. You know what? Did you know that the BFG actually first appeared in another book Roald Dahl wrote, which I think is actually his best children's book?
Which one was it?
Ever heard of Danny the Champion of the World?
No, I don't think I have.
It was one of his earlier children's books. And it was, as far as I know, I think it was like adapted for a TV movie once, and that's it. It was
Mhm.
never one of his more famous ones. And that's because the book was actually, I learned later when I found the story separately, it was originally a short story that he
Ah.
later expanded into a children's book. It was like an adult short story. Not that the story is particularly
Yeah.
adult, just that it was marketed for adults, you know.
Mhm.
And the story appears almost word for word in the finished book. Like, it's just the story is in the middle of the book. Uh,
Oh.
it is, though, it's a very entertaining book. It's probably my favorite, and it's about a boy named Danny who lives with his father in, like, a gypsy caravan, if I recall correctly. And he has
Mhm.
this wonderful relationship with his father, and it's a very moving relationship, to be honest. And it's even more moving when you know that Dahl did not grow up with a father. His father was dead, basically his
Mhm.
entire life. So it makes that relationship even more moving in retrospect. But and his father tells Danny these stories. One of the stories he tells him is the BFG. Like, that's
Aw.
where the BFG originates, is stories that Danny's father tells him. And then he expanded that into its own novel, which I agree is it's a very nice children's novel, the BFG. But
Mhm.
Danny the Champion of the World, that is not the plot of Danny the Champion of the World, though. Danny the Champion of the World is actually about illegal pheasant hunting. He
Oh
sees
wow.
his father, like, I am not kidding. He sees his father come home one day with wounds in his buttocks, and he learns that he has been shot in the butt because he has gone trying to hunt illegal pheasants. And then his father spills the beans on this. And his father tells him that back in the old days, before Danny was born, he used to be part of, like, an illegal ring of pheasant hunters.
Mhm.
Uh, and, like, everybody in the town was a part of the, like, it seems seemingly everyone in town was, like, somehow a part of this ring of pheasant hunters. And now he was feeling the old itch again because they're about to have, like, the pheasants can only be hunted if you're, like, they're brought in by rich jerks who treat everybody terrible, and
Yeah.
you can only hunt them if you're invited to one of their extremely prestigious private parties.
Well, this sounds very
So
English.
yeah, exactly. So they used to, like, Robin Hood these pheasants, right? And
Mhm.
he had this extremely comical way where, like, if a pheasant had a horsehair in its throat, then it would just not move, and you could pick it up and do what you wanted with it.
Oh wow.
And pheasants loved raisins, so you would stick a horsehair in the raisin. So they needed the pheasants. And he goes, so Danny comes up with an idea, and to take sleeping pills, uh, cut them in half, and then sew up the sleeping pills in raisins that you would leave around the forest with the pheasants. And
Mhm.
then they could just collect the pheasants after they had taken the sleeping pills and remove them all at their leisure and just walk
Oh
off
wow.
with them. So this is what they do. They go into the forest, they do this, and it ends with apparently, like, the parson's wife is in on this. Just, I guess he just found amusing that, like, the parson's wife would be in on the joke. Yeah.
Mhm.
And she has a baby in a baby carriage, and they hide all of the pheasants under the parson's wife's baby carriage. But the pheasants aren't actually dead. They've just taken sleeping pills. And as they're watching her escape, like, this is, she needs
Mhm.
to get far enough away that they can pull out the pheasants. she screams at one point, and she starts running because like they go something's wrong, and then she screams and pulls the baby away, and the baby carriage bursts open, and all of the pheasants burst out, and
Oh
then
my
just
gosh.
flop on the ground because they're all still half asleep.
Oh
Uh,
my goodness.
and then the book ends with like they ruined the guy's party, so that was nice, and they managed to get one of the pheasants to have for like Christmas dinner. Uh,
Oh wow.
but it's probably one of my favorite Roald Dahl novels. It's not very well known, and it's one of his less fantastical. But the whole
Mhm.
pheasant thing is just bizarre enough to be very funny. Uh, and the final scene is very funny, and it introduced the relationship with Danny and his father is very touching. It gives us the scene with the BFG. Again, it's even more touching when you know that like Dahl was kind of I think he was imagining the relationship he would have wanted with his father, right?
Mm,
Like it's hard not to read it that way.
yeah.
Uh, it's one of his better, I think, children's stories. So, of the ones that you've read, which is your favorite?
Let's see. I'm kind of going off my memory because it's been, gosh, so long since I've actually read any of his stuff, and I want to reread it. Um, Roald Dahl to me is kind of nostalgic because he was my first favorite author. Like whenever someone would ask who my favorite author was, it was always Roald Dahl. I think mainly because of the we listened to Going Solo a lot. We did it from the library and listened to it on road trips, and we'd listen. We had a cassette tape of the Great Glass Elevator, and that one's just so kooky, like so bizarre, and all the little things that happen in it with the Vinicius Canids and the whatever like thing they take that like changes their age and stuff. But I was very nostalgic for BFG, so I'm gonna go with BFG just because I remember that being like one of my favorites.
Yeah, the BFG it's a lovely book. It's a lovely idea for a book. It has a lot of very charming details in it. It's probably I don't know if I would put it as one of my favorites. We were discussing Ben earlier also read The Great Glass Elevator. I'm surprised the number of people who have because Hollywood insists on pretending the book does not exist. Uh like I've seen people talk about, like I've seen studios talking about making a sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I'm sure that we will see it one day. Because like they're Hollywood's out of ideas and they will make a sequel to anything. But all of the sequels I've seen have been like, they're gonna write their own sequel that will have to do with the chocolate factory somehow. They
Mm-hmm.
they steadfastly avoid talking about Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator, and I totally understand why. I am fond of Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator because of how absolutely bizarre it is. Uh, like it
Yeah.
seriously, like it goes in such a weird direction, but would be very hard to adapt as a competent movie, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talking about like Hollywood just reusing stuff. I saw someone, I think, posted just like a little um thing with I guess movie posters of movies coming up this year, and I looked at it. I'm like, is this a parody or not? Mainly because there's Lilo and Stitch, I guess, live action, but Stitch just looks so weird. And then they had Moana, and it was just The Rock, like standing in the poster, and I'm like, I guess I don't know. To that, those two just struck me as like, is this what they're offering? It was surprising, even though I shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think do you know the YouTuber Mahler who is famous for doing very long video reviews? I enjoy him. I enjoy him a lot. I'm a fan. He posted a thing on Twitter that was like Fast 10 and it said the beginning of the end. And then he goes, "What a perfect encapsulation of modern filmmaking." He's like Fast 10, the beginning of the end.
Yeah, certainly feels
Uh
that way.
yeah, it's Roald
Matilda,
Dahl.
wasn't it Roald Dahl do Matilda as well?
He did do Matilda. So I'm curious, of which movie adaptations of Dahl have you watched?
Um, I've seen both Charlie and the Chocolate Factories. I've seen Matilda. I'm pretty sure there's a witches movie. I can't remember if I think I saw the witches movie,
Yeah,
and
there's
I can't think of
there's a
anything else.
there's a witches movie from the 90s, and they just made a remake that I heard wasn't very good. Uh,
Oh yeah, I hadn't seen the remake.
The Witches, I've never seen the movie. I know about it. I've always been disappointed that they changed the ending. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna repeat this quickly because I had a longer conversation with Ben. But basically, at the end of The Witches, very famously or infamously, the main character is trapped is turned into a rat in the book, and he is
Mhm.
not changed back by the end. Like,
Yeah.
it just ends with he is left as a rat and given 9 years to live, and it's like the end. Uh, like I'm being a little bit, I guess, a little bit unfair to Dahl to say like that's it. He has a
Mhm.
conversation with his grandmother. They decide they're gonna hunt down all of the witches around the world, and
Mhm.
he has a very famous line where he says, "It doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, so long as you have someone who loves you." And since he'll still have his grandmother for the 9 years, he's content. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice in that way, but also like it is a dark. It's kind of a dark ending.
Yeah.
Like they don't even really like they never considered the idea of like maybe we can find something from the witches. I'll turn me back into a human. No, this is a one-way trip.
Yeah.
Like it's one way. That's it. Uh, so she, yeah, uh, in the witches movie, the original witches movie, he's turned back into a human at the end of it, and that always disappointed me a little. I'm like, come on, lean
Don't
into
pull
it.
the punches.
Yeah, exactly. Don't pull your punches. He's a rat now. That's his life.
He can star in Ratatouille next.
Exactly. But I heard it was a good movie. I just haven't seen it. So, what did you think? I had this conversation with Ben, so I'm curious what your opinion is. What did you think of the two Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movies as adaptations?
As adaptations, I believe. Well, yeah, like the I'll say original one is much closer to the book. The newer one I enjoyed. I forget which one I saw first. I was a fairly, I was a kid when I saw them. I know the older one scared me when they went through the tunnel. Um, that part was really creepy. I like them both. As far as adaptations, the older one's definitely better. The other one's kind of more fun and bells and whistles.
See, Ben liked the second one, the Johnny Depp version, and
Mm-hmm.
I just did not. Uh, I never liked the Johnny Depp version, so for a few reasons. First, I really didn't like Johnny Depp's performance as Willy Wonka. It struck me
The
as
character seems so different from like especially how the other actor portrayed him. Like they kind of took took everything but kind of made it their own twist and thing with it.
so
Made
Johnny
it
Depp
very Johnny
portrays
Depp.
him. Yeah, he portrays him in a very effeminate way, and
Yeah.
I'm not even saying this in like an insulting way. I think it was intentional. Like I think he intentionally portrayed Willy Wonka in a very effeminate way, and I don't know why. It seems weird to me. Like I'll be honest too, and we'll say this because we're the Superversive live stream. So hey, you might as well say this. Not a good
Mm-hmm.
look to make your head of a children's chocolate factory inviting children to meet him for a private tour. Very gay and effeminate. Uh,
Yeah.
it just like it's a weird choice. Uh,
I guess they were going for kind of making him like kooky and crazy, trying to make him look strange and different,
they
like a
were
little bit
trying
of
to
a
portray
madman.
him, I think, as very emotionally stunted. I mean,
Mm.
I do have some nice things to say about the new movie. I like that they use the original lyrics of the Oompa Loompa songs, like the
Mm.
ones that Doll uses in the book. For reasons I don't really know, they changed them in the first movie. Like, I have no idea why they bothered to do that since Doll already wrote the lyrics, but,
Mm-hmm.
like, I absolutely hated that they used one guy who they just copy and pasted over and over for the Oompa Loompas. Like, I have no idea why they thought that was that was
For
smart,
the
but
original one
no, for
or
the
the
new
second?
one.
Ah,
Yeah, in the original they used it was just dwarf actors, but
yeah.
in the new one they just took one guy and they used like one guy to play all the Oompa Loompas. I
Sounds like a
hated
lot of
that.
work.
I liked that the songs were the original lyrics that Dahl used in the book, so that's one nice thing that I will give it. Uh I think that overall aesthetically it certainly was unique. It wasn't an ugly movie per se, and it wasn't uncreative. It just like I was very uncomfortable with Johnny Depp's portrayal. Uh, the original though, I mean, I know that Roald Dahl famously hated the original movie, and I sort of understand why. Because I had this conversation with Ben about it earlier. So, if you read the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book, you have to remember that it is a children's book. Willy
Mhm.
Wonka in the book is just a well meaning chocolate factory owner, and there really is no guile in him. He's not tricking the children, right? Like, he's not lying
Mhm.
to them about anything. Uh, Obviously, you go like it violates health and safety standards. It's very unsafe. Yes, but it's also a children's book about like a fantastical chocolate factory. You know,
Yeah.
like you got to keeping that in mind. Uh, And in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in the book, like when a when a child, I mean, when a child is breaking the rules in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the book, Willy Wonka is telling them not to. And he is very
Mhm.
serious about it. He's telling them, don't do that. It's not safe. You will get hurt. Now, he
Mhm.
is then comically blasé when they do get hurt for the joke, but he doesn't want them to do it. He doesn't want them to get hurt. Whereas in the
Mhm.
movie, it looks as if the entire thing was just some sort of gigantic temptation trap, and Willy Wonka was sort of hoping that the children would get caught. Like Willy Wonka, he's
Mhm.
making comments like, no, stop, don't, and they're very sarcastic.
Yeah.
And I could see why Roald Dahl would not like that. It turns Willy Wonka into a
A
much
lot
more
more sadistic.
yeah, and a lot more sinister, right? Like
Mhm.
if there was any lie in the original, the only thing is he didn't tell the children that he was planning on picking a successor at the end of the meeting. But like the
Mhm.
reason he doesn't tell them is because he's worried that once they learn, then he won't see the real them. They'll just be on their best behavior. He doesn't like set traps for them to try and trick them into, acting
Mhm.
acting bad or going for their temptations or whatever, right? Like he was just presumably the original plan was just he'd have them all in front of him and he says, "All right, I picked my successor," and he probably would have picked Charlie anyway because Charlie is a little saintly angel child in every version of the story. Uh, but like, yeah, the I like the original movie. I think Gene Wilder's performance is good, and some of the strange stuff in it is very memorable. Like the boat ride scene is admittedly a uh, a very memorable scene with
Mhm.
Gene Wilder doing his best. So I don't think it's a bad movie, but I could see why Roald Dahl would not like it.
Mhm. Now here's
Because
the real question: which movie is more memeable?
ooh, see, hmm, that's difficult too, because the original is very memeable. Like,
I can at least there's two very well-known memes from it.
yeah,
One of
yeah,
them
you're
takes me
right.
back to 2012.
Probably the original more than the remake. Uh,
Mhm.
what did you think of the Danny DeVito Matilda movie?
Danny DeVito is the dad.
Yep.
Huh. Interesting. I enjoyed that one a lot. I think I still enjoy it today. I forget when the last time I saw it was, but um, I enjoy it.
So they made a remake of the movie as a musical that I haven't seen it in full, but I've seen clips of it, and it's actually
Mhm.
quite well made. Now, obviously, they blacked Miss Honey because by law and custom, you need to race swap one of the major characters. This is
Mm.
an ironclad law of the universe.
Wait, so
Uh,
they made the very wait. Oh no. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Miss
Not.
Honey.
I was thinking. Miss Honey, not the aggressive principal. For a second, I thought they race swapped her, which kind of would have been
No,
hilarious.
no, that would have been very funny, but no. Uh, yeah, Miss Trunchbull. But yeah, the musical remake though actually does have some merit to it. Like
Mm-hmm.
the songs are quite good, and the choreography is insane, especially when like these are children. So
Yeah.
it stands out even more. Like wow, these people can dance. But it's not a bad movie. Emma Thompson plays Miss Trunchbull. Uh, and she does a very good job. But I like the original. I will tell you, I had this conversation with Ben before you came on. One thing that I disliked about the original movie, there was a particular detail of it that I never liked, and it was a change from the book. And it's subtle, but it was like such an unnecessary change. I don't know why they did it. So Matilda has these teleportation powers, right? Like or I don't know, telekinesis, I guess it would be. Telekinesis power. She can lift things with her mind. And
Yeah.
that's pretty much the extent of her magical powers. Like that's all she could do with them is lift things with her mind, which is fine. Yeah, you could
Mm-hmm.
add your fantastical elements if you want. Uh, and they use it in a very entertaining climax where he convinces Miss Trunchbull that it's a ghost, and then Miss Trunchbull runs away. So
Mm-hmm.
good climax, good story, no complaints there. But in the book, the way that the reason Matilda has these powers, they reveal is that she is incredibly intelligent, and in fact, she is so intelligent, but she needs to be challenged more than she is. But she's in kindergarten, and they
Yeah.
won't move her up, and they won't give her more challenging material. So she can channel her excess brain power into like telekinesis.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then at the end of the book, when she is put into harder classes, the telekinesis goes away. But
Mm-hmm.
this is a bad thing. This is part of the happy ending because it means that, she's finally being challenged and, learning things on her level of intelligence.
Yeah.
Well, in the movie, they make it so that her powers are actually caused by something like repressed rage. Like they explain that because she's being yelled at and abused, her parents are abusive.
Yeah.
uh she's being the abuse from her parents is so bad that she can channel all of like her repressed anger and rage into telekinesis. And
Huh.
I really do not like this. First, I don't like it as a message. Like that if you're a kid in
Yeah.
a horrible environment, then one day then maybe you'll
But
manifest.
hanging on to your anger will help you in any way.
Yeah, and then it will like manifest as telekinesis. Like there is literally a scene of her imagining like her parents yelling at her and then channeling it into telekinesis. It's very weird. Like and then she keeps her powers at the end of the movie.
Hmm.
Just strikes me as something that like if you were a child who was in a bad situation, you would be like, so then why don't I have telekinesis,
Yeah.
And I
I
get that
liked it because I thought it was very like it's a fun movie as a kid because it's like, oh yay, kid, like she has power and is able to like change her situation because of her powers and also mess with the adults, which is funny. I totally forgot about that aspect of it and definitely agree. It's yeah, it's much better done in the book with the way they had it.
Yeah, it's just weird to me why they would make that change. Like, I think I get what they were going for. They were going for that, the things that hurt you can also make you stronger type message, right? Like,
Hmm.
uh, that she's in this horrible situation, but she can turn that around to her advantage. My problem is, uh, I don't know. I guess my problem is that when you're talking about like a Hogwarts letter or something, for example, when you talk about like, well, what about little kids in bad situations waiting for their Hogwarts letter? And that was a thing that happened. But there's a difference that Rowling would often and very intentionally emphasize, well, only wizards get letters and you're not a wizard, right?
Hmm.
But like, what is the message with Matilda's powers? Well, you only get them if you're sufficiently abused. So I guess you're not being hurt enough. Like,
Yeah.
in the book version, it's that, oh, you're not being challenged enough. Like, let's be honest, there's going to be very, very few children who are ever going to think that that's a thing. And also the ones that, right, who will ever be in that situation. And even the ones that are frankly, the smart children. So they should know that that's not how it works, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a very different situation that he's describing in the books. And I think he is completely correct to end it with Matilda losing her powers, because that's not the point. You
Mhm.
know, the powers themselves were not actually a good thing. They were a manifestation of the fact that she was not in a good environment, right? And that's
Mhm.
true in the book as well, except that in this case the environment was like she should be challenged more. She should be using her intellect more. I don't know. It's I don't think it ruins the movie by any means. I think it's a pretty well made and accurate movie. Like
Mhm.
it that does a good job with the story.
Definitely.
So, Eldritch Fran says she needs to go to Xavier's school. Yes, I'm looking at our comments, our live chat. Kids understand fantasy versus reality. They don't wait for owls to deliver letters to Hogwarts. That is completely not true. I actually disagree with that. Uh, like,
Yeah,
like
especially depending on the age of the kid.
it very much depends on the ages, and Matilda's pretty small. Like she's kindergarten age, so
Yeah.
that's the age of like maybe not the age of the people reading it, but the age of parents reading it to their kids. And it
Mhm.
says it could be that it's just a fun sci-fi story. Well, first, it's not sci-fi, actually. If anything, I think it would be more like, I guess sci-fi? I don't know. Sci-fi,
Matilda, Matilda sounds more
magic realism.
maybe, yeah. Like it's I would say it more on the fantasy side, though I guess since it was not like so much a magical element and a brain element. I still don't think it would be sci-fi though.
But yeah, like I absolutely think that children know the difference between fantasy and reality is only partially true. I will put it that way. Uh, but that was absolutely a thing with kids going like that they were waiting for their Hogwarts letter, and Rowling would respond to it like, and I think correctly. As many issues as I have with Rowling, I don't have an issue with her on this aspect of it,
Yeah,
right?
because like kids will probably know like, oh, this is a book, this is only fiction, but then deep down are hoping, like what if, maybe it is real, maybe I could be special.
And when Rowling would respond about it, she would go, "Well, it's only wizards that receive Hogwarts letters, and they're very
Oh,
rare."
you're not
So
a wizard.
yeah, and they're very rare, so that's not going to happen to you. With Roald Dahl, like I do think that you need to be somewhat cognizant of that. Of like, if you're a child watching this movie, it's just a very weird message. Even if you take
Mhm.
out the, like, well, what will kids take out of it? It's also just a very weird message. Like you said, actually, you said that it's like that holding on to that anger and rage is somehow going to be good for you. Where
Mhm.
I get what they were going for. The intended message was that, even in these horrible situations, you could turn that around and use it to be your power. But I don't think that explaining it to the audience by having Matilda imagine all of the times that her family verbally abused her, and then have it manifest as a explosion of power was a good idea. And I'm dwelling
Yeah.
on this because I think it's the biggest problem with the movie, which I think is a pretty good movie overall.
Yeah.
Like I don't think it ruins the movie or anything. It's just weird too that there was a better way to do it, and that was the way that Dal did it in the book.
Mhm.
Uh, okay. Unfortunately, we only had you on for a short period of time, and I get up at 5 a.m. every day. So
Yeah.
I
And it's
can't
it's bedtime
really
for the littles.
bedtime for the littles, bedtime for the adults, so it's all bedtime for everyone. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's a shame that we had you on for a short period of time, but we would be happy to
That was
invite
my
you back
fault,
one
so.
time. Not at all. Don't worry about it. Things happen.
Yeah.
It's all good. Uh,
Glad I was able to hop on for a bit.
I don't know if Ben is listening right now, since I know that Ben is busy doing something else. So we might just have to jump off and then call, and then that will end it. And then if there's dead air after, there's dead air. But for
Yeah.
everybody listening, thank you for listening. Uh, People who listen later, this is the authoress A.M. Freeman. Uh, She joined way, 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 way into the show, but we'll have her back one day and have a proper discussion with you about something.
I guess
Uh,
let's see. If I join again in the next couple years, it'll be my like Monday morning because I'll be in Japan soon.
oh, right. Well, if we want to schedule something with you, we could definitely reschedule the meeting that we have. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Monday mornings more than likely would probably work. But yeah, I was just like, we'll see.
I mean, it would depend. If I'm working, I can't really do Monday,
Oh
but
yeah.
whatever.
Well, no. It
Well,
would be it would be my Monday morning. It would still be your Sunday night,
oh,
but it would
oh,
be
I
my
understand.
Monday morning. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
by the way, for the record, this is how I'm gonna end the show. Eldridge Fan says good night and upload more Pinkerton's Ghosts. We have stuff coming. Uh, End of season 2 upcoming, but then Ben has his own series, so don't worry. Uh, anyway, I'm gonna end it with this. This is what I'm reading about the twits in front of me, and this is an incredible quote. The idea of the twits was triggered by Dahl's desire to do something against beards, 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 because he had an actual hatred of them. The first
Wow.
sentence of the story is, "What a lot of hairy-faced men there are around nowadays." Incredible. 10 of 10. And good night, everyone.